Committee chairperson. We'll do a quick round the table here. To my right is Public Works Director Joe Terry. To my left, Council Member Dean Veneman, and then Committee Member Matt Zacher, Council Member Tom Rayom, Clerk Jennifer Gossick, Council Member Sherry Evenson, Committee Member Patrick Delaney, Council Member Jay Bemke, and City Engineer Joe Eichstead. Okay, item number 1 is call the meeting to order. The meeting is now called to order. Item number 2, consider recommending approval of the discontinuance of Avon Street from Market Street to 5th Street North. Mr. Terry.
Thank you. So the Common Council approved the preliminary resolution map and description of the proposed detachment on 21st of September. Wood County has approved rebuilding the jail and has proposed a single campus that maintains an efficient and effective footprint to maximize value and public safety. The utilities in Avon Street serve and benefit the courthouse building. The water utilities confirmed that hydrant fire flow and water circulation will meet standards, even with the removal of any water main that currently exists in Avon Street. So with this request, the options available are to recommend approving or take no action. Staff is recommending approval of the detachment of Avon Street as proposed under the condition that Wood County would be responsible for the costs associated with any city utility relocation and will provide utility easements for any city utility that remains in the current Avon Street right-of-way.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. Any questions, comments, or concerns from committee? Okay, hearing none, I will make a motion to approve the detachment under the condition that Wood County will be responsible for the costs associated with any city utility relocation and will provide utility easements for any city utility remaining in current Avon Street right-of-way. We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? We'll take it to vote. All in favor, respond with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, we'll move on to item number 3, review the 2022-2026 Public Works Construction CIP. Oops, Mr. Terry.
So last month there was a request for a little bit more information, some summary information, so that is attached in your packet as attachment 3.1. Those tables include the design and construction costs of the various components for each of those projects, a total cost, and then a breakout of what would be considered a regular project, which is one of our routine street replacement projects, or a special project. In the case for 2022, that $830,000 is for the Jackson Street project that is part of a STP Urban grant, and that is our portion of $3-some-odd million project where the balance of that is granted. I did want to mention that I did add one project for consideration, and that's to pave 150 feet of Rosecrans Street from 9th Avenue south east to the Termini, and that would be proposed for 2023. The situation there is that that street serves an established business, and it is not currently paved. That pavement ends at 9th Street, and the little stub is just aggregate or gravel. The cost estimated for that is $16,600. The business owner had approached myself and asked if that could be a possibility, and given that I think every other business that we have in the city has a paved street in front of it, felt that it was appropriate to include. So that is added. With that, I'm not sure if there's any questions or any other information you're looking for.
Mr. Delaney?
Okay, I have a couple of questions. First of all, thank you for this. This is like perfect. Awesome. Thanks. You have a condition report on each of these. I just want to know the level that you are using for it. So there's like a 4 pour there's some that are fair. How do you arrive, there's a 3-4. How is that arrived at, and what kind of scale are we using on that?
So some of those are what are called PACER ratings for the condition of the street. PACER is a program that the DOT requires municipalities to participate in and submit that information to them. It can be useful for determining the condition of roads and streets. The challenge with that particular rating system, and that's generally what we use just because that data is handy, the challenge with that system is the DOT has some standards. So if you chip seal a street, you're supposed to give it a 7 or an 8. Well, it doesn't necessarily matter if the street's 60 years old and kind of rough. You're supposed to give it a 7 or an 8. And really, that isn't the condition of the street, you know. So we use those numbers, but we use those numbers carefully. So we go out and we try to evaluate the street condition as part of the process. And because 60% of our streets are over 40 years old, it's not too hard to justify that the street needs to be replaced. The other issue with these projects and the reasons why they're selected and prioritized the way they are is primarily because of the condition of the underground infrastructure. I meet annually with water, with wastewater, and then if we have some priority projects that those utilities have requested, we then go through and take a look at our storm sewer, evaluate the condition of the street. We try to find what we call perfect projects, where everything is bad, everybody's happy, all the utilities agree that, boy, this is a needed one. And for the most part, we're able to do that and demonstrate that. And the list that you have is predominantly projects that all of the utilities have asked for. And when we look at the condition of the street, we concur that the street's in poor condition as well. Once a capital improvement plan is approved, and then we take it to our IT department and have the GIS specialist map these for us, and we include them in all of our street maintenance activity GIS maps. When I first started here, we had a few projects where we were tearing up a street that we chip sealed a few years ago, and we don't want to do that. There's otherwise life left in that chip seal. We've torn up handicap ramps that were replaced the previous year, the year prior to that. When the staff's out looking for sidewalk repairs and handicap ramps that need replacing, we don't want them looking at projects where we're going to be replacing them in a few years. So we use this information to help make sure that we're spending money in the right place in our maintenance activities. And then we also use this information to move forward and request preliminary resolutions from the Common Council, from this committee and the Common Council, for the city's intent to do projects. Right now, that request is because we have an assessment program. That's a legal request, a legal requirement for us to do a preliminary resolution. In the event that we have a transportation utility, I still intend to go through the preliminary resolution process. That gives the city council, this committee and the city council, an opportunity to kind of relook at what we've got prioritized for generally the following year. So any of the preliminary resolutions that you folks have seen recently are for 2023. Once a preliminary resolution is done, then I authorize the engineering department to start doing the preliminary surveys and start working on the planning process. We notify residents. So this becomes a very useful document and reference for us as we move forward. So I know this was a long-winded answer to that question, but that's why we're using and showing those numbers, is just part of that evaluation that indeed the street's in condition that needs to be replaced.
Sure. Column 4, you have total cost. Does that include the special projects over to the right, or is the special projects additional to the total cost?
No, total cost is total cost. It
So
is
it's everything.
inclusive. It's everything.
Wonderful. That gets me to my next question. Okay, 2022, we're at 3.9 million, 2023, 3.4 million, 2024, 5.7 million, and then 2025, you're at 3.4, 2026 is 3.1, which I could expect because it's so far out. I mean, there's going to be more stuff added to that. My concern is with the 2024 at the 5.7 million. Has any thought been given to, I mean, that's almost, it's got to be 40% more.
Yeah, so part of that, when you look at that 700,000 in special projects, I don't have my table in front of me, but I believe that is the intention that the city receives a multi-million-dollar grant from the DOT for the reconstruction of East Jackson Street, from the bridge to East Grand. The way the city is structured with our staff and our equipment, we generally have a certain amount of work that we can do in-house. And what we've done over the years is if there's an opportunity to do a grant project, where in this case it would be 80% funded by the state, 20% locally, we've added those on top because our intention is to keep our staff as busy as we can for the construction season, get the, maximize that value. So that's why you see some of those fluctuations. Some of these other 2025, 2026, some of those, and again, I don't have that table in front of me, but we do have some resurfacing or asphalt pavement planned for the expressway. There's some other projects that are, outside of our normal residential and street reconstruction projects.
So the total cost isn't necessarily total cost to city residents, it's total
Correct.
cost of the project, and it
Correct.
can include money that we get from
Right.
grants and stuff like that.
And for 2024, the state has not approved that project yet. We've made the ask. I've included it in here so that if the state does, we can look at it. If it doesn't, and that review is occurring right now, if it doesn't, we'll scratch it off the list and have to look at, well, when are we going to do this project then? And we'd have to fund it ourselves type of thing.
Okay.
So this is just a plan document, but I think it helps everybody. If you want to go out and take a drive on these streets, take a look at it. If you have questions about, how we came up with these priorities, that's really the goal here.
Yeah, I understand that. When you have the design cost, is it just a percentage of the construction cost? Because I look at some of these and it looks like, so what's in maroon here, or red, or whatever you'd want to call that, that's about 9 to 10%, somewhere in there.
Right.
Is that the way those are figured? And
It is.
Is that outside?
No, that's all inside. That's our own engineering department doing most of this design work. We take a look at kind of our historical costs for those, and of course, our engineering department bills these utilities for that work. So, for example, for wastewater, when the engineering department's working on the sanitary sewer portion, that gets billed out. So it's useful for those various utilities, the ones that the city has direct control over, storm and sanitary, and for the water utility, for that Waterworks and Lighting Commission and that staff, it gives them an idea what they can expect.
Thank you.
Any other questions by committee? How about council on this one? Anybody? Ms. Stevenson?
Joe, I just have a quick question. So when you were saying it was the PACER system that you use to review that now, and I don't know if you know that, but what was used before years ago? I mean, I think Tom may be able to remember this, but I believe it was Chestnut that was ripped up, paved, and what was a year later, it was re-ripped up because Water and Light did one thing and then something else needed to be done the year before, and I just remember.
Yeah, I
was
think
younger
that was
than it, but I remember.
Strawberry
ever-
was one of those. And that's something that we've worked on internally, is trying to avoid those types of things. And some of the work that we've done recently has helped with that. But But the utility coordination part, and frankly, if any street's getting ripped up by any utility contractor, I think it's embarrassing. And the residents that live along those streets generally get pretty upset because up until now, at least, they're also paying for that street. What we've done is this capital improvement process and meeting with utilities and getting that information has helped because it's buy-in from the utilities. That PACER rating, we've been using that for decades. I think it was early 2000s when that rating system came out. But the coordination part has really been the last 6 years. Oftentimes, the city would determine the projects the street projects that it felt were necessary and inform the utilities, and there was a little bit of hostility sometimes that the utility didn't really wish to participate, and that's when we had some of those issues. We haven't had those. We've had very good working relationships between the utilities for the last number of years, and I think a mutual respect for the fact that it costs a lot of money to maintain all of this infrastructure. You know, if we can coordinate that work, it saves everybody money. If we have to go back, if a water utility has to go back and put in water main and replace the street in the process, the street costs as much as the water main, if not more. So it's in everybody's best interest to collaborate on these things.
Thank you. And then one other question, like when, like you mentioned a few times earlier about what the road would cost, the balance that the city needs to pay, and then we got money from the state or grant money. Who determines that? So like when a road's coming up to be due, and so do you seek, who seeks out where there's grant money available, or the DOT? How?
So it's generally myself and our engineering department. There are some regular programs. There's an STP urban program. That's helping cover the cost. It helped cover the cost, 80% of the cost for East Grand Avenue. It's going to cover 80% of the cost for West Jackson. We've applied for it for East Jackson. We've applied for it for Baker Street. We've also applied for it for 8th Street from the expressway to Baker. We put together those projects and try to determine the need. The city's been very fortunate because there are allocations, and our projects, we've had convincing enough projects, I guess, or whatever formula review process they're using. Right now, we are way beyond what we should be allocated for these projects, but the simple fact is that we have a need for them, and we continue to submit applications, and the last several years, we've been pretty fortunate to have been awarded those. There's there's a local road improvement program. That's a program by the state that is administered through Wood County. That's a biannual type activity as well. So I work with the engineering department. We take a look at our capital improvement plan, understand the limitations and the projects that these particular grants are best suited for, and then make those applications. Some of these projects, the STP Urban Fund, for example, are federal dollars, and so the design of the project needs to meet state federal specifications. The engineering costs generally go out of house for those, and so we really don't want to look at kind of a regular project for that. We would spend so much on engineering that it'd hardly be worth the grant. We really don't get the value there. But in East Grand, that's a complicated project. The Jackson, where it's a concrete street, multiple lane, those types of projects on city-owned arterials, you know, those are good projects for that particular program to fund. So it's a coordinated effort between myself and my staff to make those things happen. And I think over the last 5 years, we've probably brought in close to $2 million in grants for those programs. And we look for others. We've applied for Tiger Grant. We've assisted, we supported the town of Grand Rapids in applying for a grant that would have helped repave a road out in front of Mariani Packaging, which is a city business or city industry. So we're always seeking those opportunities and then trying to take advantage of them when they are available.
Excellent, thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, what are the committee's wishes?
Considering that we just got this on Thursday, I really haven't had a time to really in-depthly review these. If we have to have an action that's taken, I think that we could table it till next month. I don't think that's going to affect this at all, is it?
No, the projects that our staff are currently designing are ones that the Common Council's already done preliminary resolutions for. So if this takes another month, it really won't affect our work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Overall, I think it's fine. But I'd just like to look at it a little closer.
Okay, a motion will not be needed if we don't take action, so. All right, then we will move on. Item number 4, discuss transportation utility next steps. Questions, comments by committee? Joe, did you have anything you want to touch on?
Sure. So, hang on 1 second here. So my referral, some background information, the discussion at the September 21st Common Council meeting suggested alderpersons wanted to see some exact numbers for all of the proposed customers and accounts. The cost and time associated for that work is variable and isn't currently budgeted. Incidentally, the Finance and Property Committee did approve moving forward with that portion. At my request, R.A. Smith has provided a professional services agreement. This work would have been needed eventually if the Common Council approves the model, and would only be a waste if the utility isn't created. That said, for those that really want to see those numbers anyway, it won't be a waste anyway then. Consulting fees will depend on how much time staff can work on this, and given the current list of responsibilities, I estimate a consulting fee should not exceed $25,000. Referral for that was forwarded to the Finance and Property Committee for consideration, and their recommendation to the council is to approve that. Refining the transportation utility database beyond the list of examples that was already provided and connect it with utility accounts prior to approving the ordinance will extend the amount of time before the utility could operate, as some of this work would otherwise have been done concurrently with the water utility. I estimate the refining process, then approval, and then setting up the utility would result in the utility going into effect no later than the end of the first quarter of 2022. So this is just a little change of direction, and I think offers some opportunities. We've had some alderpersons ask about different levels of reaching out to the public. This would certainly allow for some additional opportunity for those activities as well. So I guess what I'm looking for is, the ordinance was read at the last meeting or presented. Under normal circumstances, then it would be voted on at the October Common Council meeting. So I guess the question or the thing that staff is asking the committee to consider is to take action to either advance the ordinance to the Common Council as is or as it wishes to amend it, or to delay advancing the ordinance until we have some of that extra information that a number of folks have asked for, and then bring it back for consideration review at a later date.
Thank you. I'll give my 2 cents on this right away. I think we need as much information as possible to feed on to city residents and businesses with this. I know the $25,000 for R.A. Smith was approved through finance, and I would like to see those steps taken before we vote yea or nay on the utility. That's my 2 cents with it. So I will make a motion to move forward with the ordinance and the consulting fees for R.A. Smith, and we'll kind of table it until we get the information needed, the complete information needed for fees structure with the utility.
You said that you're going to move forward with the ordinance, but yet table it?
We're moving forward with the consulting fees, so I mean, we'd be moving forward with trying to lock down the fees for the utility before we approve the final ordinance.
So a suggestion might be to move to complete the utility database prior to sending the ordinance to the Common Council for a vote.
I can amend my motion as such, so.
I have a couple of questions. When we, obviously, the last time that we had met for the Common Council, they had brought up that it was 85% done. Joe Eichstadt had said that he had been working with the assessor at categorizing places. Is that correct?
At the council meeting?
Yeah.
No, but I mean, in reference to that, discussion at Public Works last month, referencing the stormwater utility, that from time to time, we do work with the assessor, various property classifications.
You're right. I was mistaken. It was at the last month's Public Works Committee. I apologize. I'm trying to figure out where this 85% is. Joe Terry had said that it was at R.A. Smith that they have been doing this 85% of the work. You're saying that we've done some in-house. Have we done any work on this at all in-house? As far as categorizing residential and business?
I can answer.
From the engineering department? Just myself, assisting the director of Public Works with the high-level transportation utility ordinance and preparing stuff for Public Works and council.
Right, so Patrick, the answer to your question is no. City staff has not done any work towards creating any estimates or categorizing properties. What city staff has done is worked with R.A. Smith. The city's provided R.A. Smith with our property database that lists city properties. R.A. Smith has taken that information, and they're through about 85% of that with confirmed properties and understanding the trips that those properties generate. The remaining 15% is what we have left to do. So what staff has done is created the draft ordinance, prepared some of the tables, but the legwork to determine the number of trips on each parcel and the formula and all that has been through our consultant.
So technically, no work has been done, like as far as categorizing each place. Like you couldn't just hand me a packet right now that says, am I correct or am I wrong?
No, that would be correct. That I don't have that in hand. What R.A. Smith did was, again, they've gone through about 85% of the city's properties are identified, and that's what was used to offer the examples in the final reports and used to create the final reports and, all the information that you've been seeing for the last, well, you haven't been seeing it for the last year, but, what the council's been seeing for the last year-ish.
Yeah, what I got from the last council meeting was that you're at 85%, we're like just 15% left. Staff could work on it. I figured it would have been done by the 1st of October. I thought that this meeting then would just be reviewing some numbers.
No, that work's going to take probably at least 2 months.
Any other questions by committee? Mr. Zacher?
So from what I understood in the beginning, this was all, this is not arbitrary. This is very much set, a standardized, I don't know, book, graph, whatever it is, according to what's what. And from what I understand, like, that's where we could get ourselves in more trouble if somebody did, challenge it in court, if we kind of randomly assigned trip charges to different places. So what is, and if I remember right, it was an engineering group, right, that kind of had the book. Could you remember that offhand?
Yeah, and so the intent is that as we complete this, this last step would be in part to have city staff work with the consultant to learn how that manual is utilized, and that we would in fact purchase, there's an annual subscription. This isn't a static document, it's a document that changes, that we would purchase the subscription to the ITE manual through that group.
Okay.
And once this thing's handed over, then the city will be performing all of that work. Most of it being done, right? There'll be a few changes here and there as properties change use, as additional properties come into the city, as there may be challenges. That's our expectation then as city staff, because our engineering staff's busy working on projects, that, the initial burden of putting the utility together and putting the examples together was going to be with the help of a consultant.
Okay, so with that ITE, right?
Yes.
So that is standard, and they've outlined 85% of the city residents and businesses already.
Yes.
And so instead of spending the 25 on that 15% right now, couldn't we get a basic gist of what a residence would cost
Yeah,
and what a business?
you have that now.
So we can go off of that.
Yes.
But when we were talking to the people that were here, the residents and businesses, we weren't able to clearly tell them. Isn't that what the problem was in that meeting, that we couldn't clearly tell them what each of those groups, or were they not understanding that? Was that just me? That was like a big problem, right? They weren't understanding what it would cost. So we said, let's halt everything until we get a better idea of what everybody is going to be paying. So if we could use the 85% we already paid for and clearly tell people what they're going to be paying, like this is it right here. There's 15% more and there's more work to go beyond that, but isn't that what we needed, was that clearly defined cost to everybody in the city, roughly?
So that's what we tried to do with the examples that we gave, and saying,
Right.
look, you could figure roughly, if you're a business, that it's 3 cents per car that visits your business, that's kind of where we're at. And then a number of examples for, what a single-family home looks like, what an office space might look like, what a fast food place or a convenience store. So we had a kind of a assortment of examples there to get you in the ballpark. I mean, our desire was to try to determine, does this method make sense? Do we want to charge our property owners for our transportation system based on the number of trips that those properties generate or not? So that was really the goal of our work so far. And if the answer was yes, all right, well, it'll take, if you've worked on any project that requires any sort of, whether it's a construction project or whatever, you can be 90% done and still have 90% of your time left to go. And that's kind of what this is. I mean, we didn't spend $25,000 to get where we're at. The low-hanging fruit are the vast number of residential properties. Those are easy. Those are consistent throughout. the ITE manual as far as the number of trips that are generated by a residential property. The challenge is the handful of odd businesses, odd properties that we have to identify some sizes, we have to, we have to do some research and review some of these individually. So that's why there's so much potential cost in finalizing this thing.
So if we're gonna get back together in 2 weeks, then the city, the folks are gonna be out here again, and they're gonna be asking more questions and wanting more information. Is that all we are looking at right now? I guess I'm talking about us as a council. Like, is that what we wanted when we finished up at the last council? We didn't want to present any more to the public until we had that information. But the 15% that we're asking to get for the $25,000, I understand we're going to have to do it regardless. But it doesn't seem to have anything to do with meeting with the public again in 2 weeks, because they're going to ask the same questions. How much is it going to cost? So we could take the 85% again and more clearly define it for them to say, this is what it's going to cost. Like, are we all in understanding of that?
So the, the estimates that we have, those examples, are examples based on the number of trips that we have calculated with that 85%.
Right, I get that.
Some of these parcels, that's what we need to do yet, is figure out how many trips. The whole equation is based on the number of trips total and the number of trips to each parcel, because there's two components.
Yep.
And so I guess one of the cautions is that the numbers that I've presented, I believe are conservative. I think that at the end of the day, it will be less, because as we refine this and complete it, there will be more trips than what we've currently identified, which means the cost per trip goes down and the cost per property goes down. To be able to have somebody come in and says, look, here's where my business is, I want to know what I'm going to pay. In order to be able to do that, we would need to go through this next step. And if we go through this next step, I've talked to our IT department. We've done it, similar things with our GIS maps, with property information. We should be able to create a GIS map where you could type in your address and it will tell you, well, this is what it'll be. And we can use that then for reference if we want to get to that level before we approve the ordinance, or we want to be able to make sure we have that before, to satisfy the public. That's what this next step would allow us to do. So really, the question that we have as staff is, do we want to hold off on approving the ordinance until we can do that? Because there seemed to be some discomfort at the last meeting. Or does the model and the method seem to be fair and make sense? And just like a wastewater utility or a water utility, you don't know exactly how much water someone's going to use. And so it varies a bit. The difference here is that everybody trusts a water meter or electric meter. This is new. They don't necessarily trust the manual or those calculations. That's kind of the difference here.
Okay. So I guess in my head, what I keep going back to is, if we say okay to the $25,000 and we get this implemented and going, and then we meet with the public in 2 weeks, and then we all get swayed by the public or whatever, we don't know what we're going to vote yet, and we vote no to the utility, then we just spend $25,000 for no reason, right? So we actually want to vote on the utility before we spend any more money on the utility.
Or we get to the point where you can table voting on the utility. And again, it depends on everybody's level of confidence. Have another public hearing where if the public comes in and asks those questions, we have those answers. If there's if that's a concern, and from some of the alderpersons that have talked to me about it, that was the concern. So, we can do it either way.
Are we saying that, like, if a business comes in, we're going to be able to say, this is exactly what you're going to pay?
Right.
that's what we want to be able to do. I guess as a group, that's what we're shooting at. Or we could say right now, 85% of the people that we could tell them exactly what they're going to pay.
I think the key part to it is that last 15% is the bulk of who's going to be paying the highest fees. That's
Oh.
going to be those unique businesses that could be seeing very large fees. And I think we need to make those fees known before we should pass this ordinance.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. That helped. Thank you, Joe.
That's my estimate. My estimate is it's going to take about 2 months for us to, of dedicated work to finish this database and have it to the point where we can be confident that these are the actual numbers that we can present to the public. It's an estimate.
What do we have to provide to clarify? I know they, what do we have to
So some of it's going to be our own eyes and ears, visiting some properties, asking some questions, working directly with the assessor, things like that. The more that we can do with our own staff, obviously, the cheaper this will be. At the same time, our staff's fully committed in project work, so there's some things that we're going to have to do, or they're going to have to, make some phone calls or things like that. So, but that's going to be the process to determine some of these others. It's going to be more communication between R.A. Smith and city staff, whether it's the assessor's office, whether it's my public works department, to ascertain some of the specific information to kind of nail down some of these properties.
that 2-month number, that includes us doing stuff first, all right, Smith getting started until you're at this point?
No, that's us working together for 2 months, because it's parcel by parcel. And that's my estimate. And if we move forward, that, we're going to have a phone call with R.A. Smith tomorrow. I've already scheduled that. And so that even prior to the common council meeting, we're going to talk strategy and timelines and things like that. So, if this thing gets held out and there's a desire for further discussion or further information, but that's the expectation. I mean, all along, our goal was to try to have this so that we could do our work and have it done, by the end of the year. Given that this is something new, that's a lofty challenge for us because it's not something we've done before. But based on the work that's been done so far, I think that's a number that I'm throwing out there. I think we can hit it.
Ms. Evans?
Thank you. Joe, could you kind of hit on the special assessment timeframe? If we hold it out, kind of like they talked at the last meeting, about the special assessment hearing happening in April for the 2021 assessments.
Right.
That if we miss that timeframe, unless we would vote as a council to push, or Public Works to push it back to May or June before the special assessment hearings happen. Otherwise, those special people will be paying special assessments.
Right. So
Could you just kind of,
Yeah, so just a review on that, we touched on, for those that were here at the last meeting, but those that weren't, our process, once our construction projects are done for 2021, over the winter months, we'll finalize project information, costs, and figure out those special assessment allocations. City engineer will prepare an assessment report. There will be a final resolution prepared. And then at Public Works, a recommendation, it'd be a public hearing to review that engineer's report, review and adopt the final resolution. Once the council approves that, the assessment bills actually go to the property owners. That generally happens somewhere around April. Last month, this committee voted and the council confirmed that any projects that haven't had the final resolution prior to the utility being implemented would not have a final resolution. They wouldn't have special assessments. If our utility is approved, well, then we also know over the winter months, we won't be working on those special assessment documents. If the utility is not approved, we have to. City ordinance dictates that. And so, so April is kind of unique because if the utility takes a little bit longer to actually implement and we get towards that April timeframe, we'll have that engineer's report and final resolution prepared. And the committee needs to review it and then adopt a final resolution in accordance with our, with our ordinances. So, so the timing on everything, if the objective is to try to make sure that we are done issuing special assessment bills, we'd either need some action by this committee and the council to delay that, or the transportation utility would need to be in place prior to about April, when we generally get that work done. Does that cover it?
Thank you.
Mr. Delaney?
During the last meeting, you had mentioned that we don't have to bill at 100%. Maybe we could do like 75% or 50% if we, of the total cost. Is that correct? So that would change the numbers.
For the transportation
Yes.
utility? Yes, absolutely. So what you have received so far, along with the ordinance documents, is Table A. And that's similar to our wastewater utility, where Table A is the rate structure. And in this case, Table A defines what amount of money does the city want to generate. And so the council has the ability to change that to whatever it wants. If it wants, if it knows that, hey, we know we're going to move forward with this thing one way, shape, or form, but we want Table A to be 0. There won't be anything billed until we adopt a new Table A. Well, the transportation utility would exist, and then it wouldn't be until that table is reviewed that there'd be fees associated. And the council decides how much. So if the council decided, we like the direction that we were going, we thought that making sure that we don't have special assessments, that we're not doing loans, and that we include some additional for some other surface street repairs, that, on second thought, we just want to do the special assessment part. The ordinance doesn't change. Table A changes.
Yeah, that makes sense to continue on with what we're doing, because the numbers potentially can change, and they probably will change from year to year, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
So, I can understand where you would want to know exactly what it's going to be, but it's going to be different in 12 months anyways.
It would put it in perspective, though.
Yeah.
If I owned a business and I knew that it was going to be $100 a month, all right, well, I know that that's what it's going to be, and it might change a few percentage, just like your taxes might change a few percents, but generally, you get an idea. And I think that's what most people are looking for, is what can I expect?
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, that's what we should do. I thought we would be further ahead. I thought that we would have this done by now, and that last 15% would be all complete. I do like your idea of that, moving forward with the language of the ordinance and whatnot, even if we hold off until April, because you said that it's not going to change anything, right? Like, if we wait till April, it's not really going to change. Okay. So I'm going to second.
Okay, yep, we have a motion on the floor and now seconded. Any other discussion? Ms. Stevenson?
Are we talking right now about the whole transportation utility ordinance itself, or you're just talking about?
Yeah, so the motion is to complete the utility database and delay action on approving the ordinance until the database is complete. So it would delay the ordinance from being voted on at the council meeting until after we're able to say, hey, for your property, this is what it's going to be, given the proposed Table A and, given the number of trips that the city would generate.
Okay, so then we wouldn't discuss it or if they decide right here in committee that they're going to proceed but not active or put it into place until all the final numbers are complete. And you're thinking it's about a couple months, which could still be done before the April assessments would come out.
Correct.
Okay. And as far as the ordinance language, can I ask questions about that, or is that not appropriate right now?
Go ahead.
The only question I have is, in the draft, it's 51.07, G. It says structures used for the storage, maintenance, and repair of transportation-related operational equipment. I have a hard time swallowing that one. I agree, all of us here today would believe that that would be a capital improvement, right? But I'm worried about maybe 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road. All of us are aware in government, the state, Public Works has the biggest budget, road repair, and they take money out of those budgets all the time to do things. And what I'm worried about is somewhere down the road saying, well, you don't need any city money, you don't need any money, because right there in your ordinance, it says that you can build your garage for your equipment right there, so we're not budgeting you any money. And in the meantime, all of the citizens that have been paying for this to fix the roads, now that money is gone because it was used for a garage versus the streets. And I have a big problem with that. Like I said, we're all on the up and up here right now today, knowing that we know every year the council can vote on what it's to be used for. But I worry about that long term, because that's a huge budget. And that could very easily be used for that. And I really would like all of you to really think about that line item, because
Can I respond? Yeah, so that's a great point. As we were, as staff and our city attorney was reviewing the ordinance language, right, and that we drafted in-house. What we wanted to do is make the utility language flexible enough so that the city council can do as it wishes. When we're performing our public works construction projects and maintenance activities, part of what gets billed to that is equipment time and cost. So we create a rate that we're charging the equipment out for, right? So the transportation utility will be paying for some equipment that's being used for those activities. The city garage, its purpose is to house the equipment to perform those activities. So by having that in the ordinance, it allows the city council the flexibility to really do what it wants. That facility was built, a good part of it, in 1948. It's at the end of its life, and more modern facilities with better ventilation, better circulation, things like that can improve the length of the service life of some of the equipment that's inside that building. And the cost of equipment is such that there is a pretty positive return on investment for that. So without getting into any more detail there, fact of the matter is that's going to be a project that the city's probably going to borrow for. Now, does it want to bond for it and have the taxpayers pay back the bond through our bond schedule, or does the city want to bond for it and have the utility pay it back? The ordinance allows that flexibility. And one of the challenges for every elected official is, do you want to trust the next common council? Right? Everybody's trusting you. Everybody's voted for you. To what level do you want the city to have the flexibility to be able to decide do we not want the utility to do that, or do we want the utility to do that? And that all falls out in Table A, right? So right now, what you see in Table A is what we're proposing for capital improvement projects, and that's it. It's not for the garage, it's not for anything else. And so if the common council decides, well, we want to spend the money on a city garage out of the utility, you're right, the utility won't have funds to redo streets without changing Table A. So if there's a $15 million bond issue to rebuild a city garage and an annual payment of so much, the city council can decide, do we want the utility to cover that? And if so, we're going to include that annual principal and interest in the transportation utility so that we're generating funds through the utility for that. Or we're not gonna. We're gonna borrow for that, and the taxpayers are gonna cover that through property taxes. It really is about the flexibility for the common council to act in the way that the common council feels is in the best interest of the city at that time. Now, we could omit that, and a future common council could say, you know what, let's change it, we want to include it. Because the council can change ordinances as it sees fit. But as we put this together, we really wanted to take a look at what are all the expenses that are reasonable and legal for a utility to potentially cover. We're not going to cover our maintenance right now, that we've already discussed that. It's just the replacement projects. At some point in time, the city may decide, we do want to include some of the maintenance costs in the transportation utility and take it out of the general fund instead. What's proposed offers the city that flexibility to really decide how it wants to do it without having to rewrite the ordinance. Table A is the key to that the council can decide to what extent does it want to generate those funds and for what, as long as it meets those items, and those items, again, are the ones we don't want to include: snow and ice control. We don't want to include street sweeping. We wanted this to be something that we're not guessing about in 5 to 10 years, that, oh, well, let's include. No, we've included everything that we legally can include already, unless something else changes. We didn't want to have to second guess a few years from now, well, let's include the city garage, let's include street sweeping, let's include snow and ice control. So that's kind of the method behind our madness there.
Thank you. Again, I would have a hard time explaining that to the people that call me saying, okay, we're putting money in every week, whatever, for the transportation. And I looked at the budget and, okay, now we're borrowing for streets, that part of it. I thought that's what the utility was fun, not to build a garage, because I've already heard it from many people, because they saw that in there as well. And I missed it the first time. I apologize because I missed it. But I just couldn't vote for the transportation utility with that in it. That's just my view, but thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to move forward with the consulting fees with R.A. Smith and table the ordinance until final pricing is approved, and a second.
I just have a question though then.
Mr. Rio.
Are you moving to go along with the 25,000? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Because that finance did that. So I'm wondering what Public Works is really doing. That's where I have a question then.
So what this motion does, Tom, is it's going to hold off voting on the ordinance until after we're done with this exercise. That's the difference. Is it otherwise, if there was no action, the ordinance comes before the common council at the October council meeting. Council could approve it or not. What this action does is it tables that until we have that database finalized.
And my only thing does this committee then, is that the right motion to make? I don't know.
I think if you want to have all of the information.
Finance, that's what they were going to do. So I guess maybe the motion has to be something, I don't know, maybe it.
No, I don't think so. I think Finance's motion is to approve the contract with RAC. So
Yep.
that's that motion. This one is, where are we going to put the ordinance? Are we going to put the ordinance ahead of that work? Or are we going to put the ordinance behind that work? And what this motion does is it puts the ordinance behind that work. We will do that work with R.A. Smith first before bringing that motion back to the council.
Any other discussion? Okay, we'll take it to vote. All in favor, respond with aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, well, the ayes have it. All right, we will move on to item number 5, review proposed degradation fee schedule for 2022. Mr. Eckstead?
So in the packet, I included information for the proposed rates for 2022. The degradation fee is for impacts and deterioration that occur due to utility excavations and patching within the city's right-of-way mainly by utility companies and contractors. By ordinance, that fee shall be established in an amount sufficient to recover the costs incurred by the city to maintain that infrastructure over the life of the street or patch. So the items that degradation fees are applied to include asphalt pavement, concrete sidewalk, and curb and gutter. And the recommendation is to approve the degradation fees that are presented here.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by committee? How about council? Okay, what are the committee's wishes?
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed degradation fees for 2022 as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll take it to vote. All in favor, respond with aye. Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Okay, we'll move on to item number 6. Review proposed modification of Chapter 6 to clarify the limitations of use of colored concrete in the public right-of-way and driveway. Mr. Eichstead?
So this is generally a housekeeping item. Currently, the Chapter 6 ordinance does not expressly prohibit the use of these items, but it also is very specific about which items that can be included in the concrete, and it does not, it doesn't have provisions for concrete color additives or stamp finishes for driveways or sidewalk sections in the public right-of-way. And so there's some draft language in the packet in 6.22 under Portland cement concrete driveways that reads, colored and stamped concrete is not allowed within the driveway approach or sidewalk section within the public right-of-way. The requested action is to approve the ordinance amendment as written. But certainly, if there's any questions.
Mr. Delaney?
Is, singularly, is stamped concrete allowed?
Not in, well, outside of
In-
driveways and sidewalk sections.
According, what we're changing on this, is one or the other allowed? Because as it reads stamped and colored. I want to
Oh,
know
sure,
if
yes.
stamped is, colored isn't, colored is.
Right, individually combined, neither.
All right. I think we should have a D and a E. One colored concrete is not allowed, and then the rest of that sentence, and then on the next one, stamped concrete is not allowed, and then the rest of that sentence.
Mr. Zacher?
So a resident could do it from the portion of the sidewalk to their garage that's closest to the house. They can do what they want there. It's just the sidewalk area and then the approach from the road to the sidewalk?
Yep, the private section of the driveway can be colored and stamped.
They are, the resident is actually paying to have that portion installed in their driveway though, correct?
Correct.
So they would basically have to have two separate pours done. I'm just curious, is there like what's the reasoning behind it, I guess?
Well, for the sidewalk section, largely the stamping and ADA requirements, to have a smooth finish, not a polished finish, but a smooth finish, that would be required. The stamped finishes create tripping hazards and whatnot. And then having colored sections, you can imagine the city trying to do sidewalk maintenance with different colored sidewalk panels and creating some consistency and uniformity to what's in the public right-of-way.
Thank you.
And I can add to that, depending on the color, it can be quite difficult to get colored concrete, so. Mr. Bemke?
So I've had a couple of these issues in my neighborhood. One pretty recently. I guess if the homeowner understands that either one, they're going to be responsible for the cost, or two, if the sidewalk and the approach has to be replaced. I guess the stamp part I understand. The color part, I don't get it. A lot of these places are standalone driveways that'll probably never have sidewalk going through them, so it won't be like you have a red one and a brown one and a green one, whatever the colors might be. But I don't know. The property, you're familiar with the property. There is no other sidewalk there. I think we've had another incident just to the south of that within the last few years as well. I just don't understand the colored part. If they're responsible for the cost, if they want to replace it at that color, you get what you get. If not, you replace it with gray or whatever the color is. Thank you.
Mr. Eichstadt?
So just to touch on the color, the other aspect with it, and I understand that it's privately paid for, but the use of certain colors within the public right-of-way, traffic sign orange or neon yellow, green, those things are reserved for traffic signage. Those colors are reserved. So even allowing colors would certainly, in all the issues, that there'd certainly be some limitations on the colors that we would want to be used.
It's been my understanding that this has been something that's kind of been enforced, but it hasn't been in ordinance. So there are examples of properties in the city that have colored concrete in the right-of-way approaches and sidewalks. Is that what I gathered?
There are some of which we're not certain how they were permitted to be there. Certainly there's other uses that the city has downtown, decorative colored stamped boulevard terrace areas, but not sidewalk or driveway approaches.
The city hasn't issued permits or allowed anybody to install colored or stamped. If they did it without a permit, but we've had a few issues recently, and, there's some debate about it, and we were able to justify that the ordinance doesn't allow it. But the amount of time that it took away from staff having that discussion, it's like, it'd be so much easier, and the ordinance doesn't allow it right now. It just doesn't say it. It says what you can do, and part of what you can do is concrete mix design, and it doesn't include color. So it's there. It's just abstract, and it creates angst and debate. And that debate this last time, what was it, Joe? Over a week of discussions back and forth between the contractor and the owner and the engineering department, and it was just very time consuming.
And several hours of my time. There were others involved as well, and it's just a housekeeping item, I think, at this point. 'Cause certainly our ordinance is clear, but that that doesn't necessarily stop people from asking and making claims. And it's just nice to be able to point to it and say, this is what's allowed and this is what's prohibited.
So if this was to pass, this addition to the ordinance, properties that are in violation of this currently, will they have to be addressed, or what would be the scenario there?
So the only ones that I'm aware of, like we've run across, like on 18th Avenue this construction season, there's one driveway with colored and stamped ribbon adjacent to their approach. That's being fixed with the road construction project. In addition, there was a carriage walk that was privately installed with pavers. You know, it was in the public right of way, but it's not public sidewalk. That's also getting corrected with the project. As with any of these, now that the ordinance is specific, or would be specific, that the next time any permit is taken out, it's brought up to current standards.
Ms. Evans?
I think they're very pretty, but to be consistent, like Joe was just saying, I mean, if you had, I mean, just imagine driving into town and there's this stamped all over, and then there's this stamp bright pink or this orange, or, I mean, and it should be more, it should be uniform. For that sake alone, just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments? Mr. Delaney?
Joe, you never fully answered the question. If somebody has it now, they find out, we find out, hey, it's not supposed to be there in a place that does not have construction up. You guys aren't going to go to them and be like, hey, this needs to be ripped out and replaced, right?
No, that's usually we're not out looking for those things anyway. We don't know how they got there in the first place. We don't know how long they've been there. In a lot of cases, some of these have been there for 20 years already.
Okay. What are the committee's wishes?
I'd like to make a motion. I understand what Jay's saying, so I was wondering if we could change the driveway approaches to include where there is a sidewalk that intersects the driveway, then the following with D, being colored concrete is not allowed within the driveway approach or sidewalk section within the public right of way. E, stamped concrete is not allowed within the driveway approach or sidewalk section within the public right of way.
I'll second that. Any other discussion? Mr. Zacher?
Just to clarify, what was that part about where there's a sidewalk that
Like you said,
intersects?
there's a lot of driveways that there's never going to be a sidewalk on it. And if it's their property and they want to have a yellow brick road up to their house, I think that's fine.
Is it going to cause a problem, though, with the people who want to do it but have a sidewalk and say, well, Billy, Joe, Jim Bob got to do it down there, how come we don't get to do it up here? Are we going to run, are we going to, maybe I shouldn't joke, I don't know, but what was that, aren't we running into, like? you
Yeah,
got
we
to do
might
it-
be, and then with future expansion of sidewalks, that might cause a problem as well. Hey, I'm just throwing it out there.
I feel like it, from your sidewalk to your house, rainbows and, unicorns and everything else you want to do, but from the sidewalk to the road, we should probably keep city uniform, I think. So then everything would stay the same, or I don't know how we would do this, I guess I'm not agreeing.
Was that not your motion, or were you referring to actually letting, what I understood was you wanted to separate colored and stamped concrete.
That's
two
the-
different line items.
That's the first part, or the second part of it. The first part is where there's a sidewalk adjoining the driveway. So we would be changing the first line of 6.22.
You want to touch on this, Mr. Terry?
I was just going to mention the same thing, that, you know, there are places where sidewalk gets installed. It does potentially create some continuity, but you mentioned that already, so. You know, some potential continuity issues in the future, you know, and that question of the driveway itself, if I don't have sidewalk next to my driveway, I can do colored out to the curb, but if I have sidewalk, I'm now being penalized, and it creates some inconsistency then within the ordinance, because the materials that are allowed in the ordinance don't include the color. You know, what we're looking to do here, like Joe said, is a housekeeping item to just clean it up. This, if we allow colored in some places, that creates a discrepancy within the ordinance as far as what's allowed now. So we'd have to dig a little deeper to make that change work.
So are you keeping that in there? Or if you take it out,
If like what Jay had said, there's homes that they will never have a sidewalk to them. And I don't see hindering their approach to their garage or their home if we're not running into the sidewalk issue or anything like that, unless future expansion. But in his example, they're not going to have it. So I would like to, whatever you guys want to vote. If you guys want to do it, great. If not, we can have another motion.
Mr. Terry?
So if colored's allowed, and I'm just going to throw this out there, if we're plowing snow and our snow plow jumps the curb, now scratches their colored concrete, or heaven forbid, we have a situation like we had this year with chip seal where it got rained on and some of that material ended up on a driveway, and, you know, the city was cleaning that. You know, what's the expectation then? It's city right away. If a panel has to be replaced, or a truck backs up and cracks a corner, the panel's got to be replaced, it can be very, very difficult to match. I'm just wondering how that might, not that that would happen very often. It's just a hypothetical.
Mr. Zacher? That's correct, yep. I think I'm going to retract my second on this one, though, now that it's been clarified. It presents a unique problem for the city if they do encounter any issues with damaging private property. So that's kind of the whole reason why we want to put this in the ordinance to begin with, is to eliminate those issues. So just keeping that door open doesn't make sense to me. So we can move on with, will there be a second to Mr. Delaney's motion then?
Okay, then I'd like to make another.
Mr. Delaney, go ahead.
Okay. What I would like to do on 6.22, I would like to have a D. Colored concrete is not allowed within the driveway approach or sidewalk section within the public right-of-way. E. Stamped concrete is not allowed within the driveway approach or sidewalk section within the public right-of-way. If we could put a date on it and grandfather in any ones that are already done, and that's it.
And I'll second. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, we'll take it to vote. All in favor, respond with aye. Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Okay, on to item number 7. Review proposed modification of street design criteria to clarify allowable boulevard plantings. Mr. Eichstadt.
So again, another housekeeping item. This one's specific to engineering department policy. And again, these are long-standing criteria and uses that we use in the engineering department when doing designs and issuing permits. But again, it's not documented anywhere for other staff to be able to be on the same page as the engineers in our department, or future staff employees that fill these shoes in the future. But these items are specific to the use of the boulevard and what the boulevards can be used for. So in the packet, there's quite a few pages in this policy. The first paragraph just references boulevards within the public right-of-way shall conform to the dimensions on drawing F2, which is it's the second page of the official street map, which is referenced in the ordinance. And that defines the cross-sections and the widths of the boulevards and street. Additionally, boulevards provide certain benefits to the use of, to the right-of-way, to the users of the right-of-way, and is physical space for power poles, street signposts, traffic control signs, trees, plantings, mailboxes, etc. There's regulatory and guidance documents that are listed in the third paragraph that provide some context of what things to use to review and implement uses for the boulevard, including engineering judgment and established permitting requirements of the engineering department. Additionally, the boulevards shall be maintained by adjacent property owners. That's a common question that we get from property owners on, well, you know, mowing the grass and cleaning the sidewalks and such. The fifth paragraph, boulevards 3 feet wide or larger shall be grass unless otherwise approved for use as asphalt or concrete in commercial or industrial areas only. And boulevards under 3 feet in width shall be either concrete or asphalt as determined by the engineering department. And then lastly, the last paragraph is primarily exclusions. So items specifically excluded from use or placement within the boulevard include rocks, vegetation over 30 inches in height, any object that creates a hazard, any object that is not essential for public safety, and any object that is not expressly permitted.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by committee? Mr. Delaney?
Could you give me the definition of boulevard?
It would be the typically the space between the sidewalk and the back of curb.
So every home has a boulevard if they have a sidewalk? Do homes without sidewalks have boulevards?
Yeah, in that case, I would say without sidewalk, it'd be from the property line to the curb.
Can you give me more background on this? Like, where does this come from? Like, there's a full page here. Is there something specific that's going on?
No, it's just from time to time, there are some property owner, some properties where we find situations where people are using the boulevard area, the part of the public right-of-way, that, you know, over time, it's like, well, that's my lawn, I take care of it, and now we've got giant boulders, or we've got tall grass, or we've got perhaps businesses on A Street that they want to put in a rock mulch type of landscaping out, you know, right behind the curb, and, you know, some of the concerns there, those rocks will end up out in the roadway. And so just through the permitting process and fielding these phone calls and such, there's been identified over the course of time, many months and years, that documentation like this is missing in any of our policies. Certainly, we've been operating this way for quite some time, but there's nothing to go back to that. Well, what's the city policy on that? Well, we don't have one. No, it's missing.
So if I have a driveway and I park 2 vehicles in it, nose to tail, and there is no sidewalk, but it comes right out to the edge of the road, you would say that is a violation of this new ordinance? Because it is in the boulevard.
Yeah, it's also within the private access to their property, which gets into another issue, I guess, as far as, enforcement of proper parking on the driveways. But without the sidewalk being there, you just see the sidewalk section and vehicles sitting on top of that.
Mr. Terry, you want to touch on that?
Yeah, just for clarification, it would be more like if you were going to put some decorations out. Maybe you had a wooden sculpture or something, and you wanted to put that out right next to the curb. And that was going to be your decoration in front of your house, right? Some kid rides by on a bicycle, crashes into the thing, or the snowplow hits it and wrecks it, or those are the types of things that we're dealing with. Parking in the driveway, the driveway is not part of the boulevard. It's really the standard grass strip from behind the curb to the property line, or the sidewalk if there's sidewalk there. We just don't want to see planting of hedgerows, maybe even trees, because we don't want to plant trees over the top of the water and sewer service lateral, right? So we want to have control over the boulevard and what goes there for public safety, and to try to maintain those pieces of infrastructure. If you want to plant the tree over, over your sanitary sewer lateral in your yard, you know what? It's your lateral. But from that curb stop out for the water, that belongs to the utility. So we just want to have some control for safety and continuity there.
I can understand that. I can just see how it could be used though, where, like your car is not far enough away from the road, but yet it's still 100% your driveway without a sidewalk. I don't see.
Yeah, that's not part of it. That would be any police department enforcement of traffic rules, because this is specific to the boulevard, not your driveway.
Okay, so the boulevard does not go into your driveway at all?
Right. The boulevard would end, that driveway apron, that's where the boulevard ends, and then it continues then from the other side of your driveway.
Thanks, that's why I asked for the description of boulevard. Thanks.
So boulevards 3 feet wide or larger shall be grass unless otherwise approved for use as asphalt or concrete in commercial or industrial areas only. Who's going to determine those parameters? And I mean, is it going to be based off of how the property is zoned, or what's the intention there?
So largely that's already, that's been in effect. All of these things are all under current operations today and have been for a long time. These things are also used by our department with the street department when we're doing our road projects and even working with consultants. They're also used when property owners call and say, hey, I want to get a permit to work in the right-of-way, and this is what I want to do. Or their contractor or utility companies. So we're already making those assessments. Take a look at what they've got, what they plan to do. So when they ask, like, hey, we'd like to redo this, what can we put back in there? We'd like to put concrete back in there. Well, city policy is that grass goes back, or whatever the case might be. But certainly not rock mulch and other things that could be a hazard.
Sure. I guess my concern would be, we force a commercial business to put in grass when they're requesting, concrete. Obviously, a 3 foot wide or a 4 foot wide or a 5 foot wide slot of grass. To have to purchase a mower just to mow a small section when they could just pour it in. I guess how is that determined? Is that something that we will look at case by case or?
Yep, it's usually case by case.
Okay.
If a residential property owner wants to put their boulevard back in as concrete, the answer would be no, it would be grass. But a business along A Street or other downtown type of area, they would have more discretion or leeway because of their situation in an urban environment.
Thank you. Mr. Delaney?
Also, in the last part, it says that any object cannot be placed in there. What about like rummage sale signs or something that is typical, like a yard sale, a rummage sale?
Yeah, any of those types of privately installed signs in the right-of-way are prohibited by the city ordinances already. You know, they can put them back on private property, but they can't put them in the right-of-way. And I know you see them all over the place, but
I like going yard sailing. I mean, how am I supposed to get there if I don't have proper directions?
Any other questions or comments by committee? Council? What are our committee's wishes?
Brian, I'll just throw my 2 cents into this.
Go ahead,
too,
Jay.
since the rocks, the decorative stuff in the boulevard, you know, they pull out snow in places that, you know, you get some of these bad winters and stuff, places that they're not familiar with. And let me tell you, a 12-inch diameter rock can do a lot of damage. It's just, it is what it is. It's just not a good place for those things to be. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to approve the proposed policy language as presented. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Do we need to put in there that they can't put stamped or colored cement in there? All right.
All right, hearing none, we'll take this to vote. All in favor, respond with aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Ayes have it. Okay, we will move on to item number 8. Review proposed modification of the parking ordinance to limit parking on the north side of Oak Street between 7th Street North and 8th Street North from 15-minute parking on school days to be only for authorized vehicles during school days. Mr. Eichstadt?
yes. So this was a police department request. Assume, I don't know, Ed, if you're here on behalf of the school for this item, but, so the Chapter 27, section for 15-minute parking in the area, there's a map in the packet that shows the area and that's proposed changes to the parking. Changing it from 15-minute parking on the north side of Oak Street, west of 8th Street to 7th Street, changing it to the Oak Street, the north side between 7th and 8th Street, between 8 a.m. and 8:45 a.m., and between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. on school days, except for the following authorized vehicles who may load and unload passengers during those times: school buses, vehicles for persons with disabilities, taxi cabs, Boys and Girls Club, vans, and other school district approved vehicles. And I've reviewed this. I don't have any issues with making this change or recommending this change to the committee.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by committee? Mr. Delaney?
I'd like to hear this side over here.
Yep.
Ed Allison, Buildings Grounds Director, Rapid Schools. Everybody else was busy, so you get me. Yeah, this is where, we have bus pickup down there. We had a bus car accident there last year, minor one. But, so there's a little inlet there where our buses pull. So through the pandemic here, we've had more drop-offs by parents. We have some parents parking down there. It's hard to get the buses organized. So when the little guys come out, they like the buses to be in order, so they don't get on the wrong bus, and this would really help us out. Are there any questions? Yeah, we don't have a parking lot over there, so we rely on the church, so we have a couple crossing guards that help them across 8th Street, and they park in the Emmanuel parking lot right now. It's not ideal, but it works pretty well.
I guess another thing to touch on would be the entrance construction that is anticipated in the
Yep.
spring. So obviously, it should be during off times of the school year, but if it does run over,
Right.
you know, you guys are prepared to handle drop off and pick up
Our schools aren't built to handle that much car traffic, you know, they were made to have kids all bused and, you know, maybe pickups for doctor's appointments, and we have probably 30-40% of the kids getting picked up and dropped off by their parents now, and it really creates some congestion. So trying to go through each building, and, you know, Rapids PD and engineering, they've really helped us out with traffic counts and things like that, just trying to make things safer as we go through. But the pandemic kind of threw things for a loop. There's a playground, there's some blacktop area back there, but it wouldn't be big enough for a parking lot. Yep, yep. Yeah, I hate mixing, because you have some kids too that walk, and they go through that playground. I hate mixing the cars, well, cars and kids especially, but then buses and kids, you know, that little guy, he gets out in front of a bus, you can't see him. So I'm always leery on making changes to our drop-offs, because I don't want to make things worse. So I really appreciate you guys' help, you know, in Rapids PD kind of giving it their stamp of approval first and foremost. But I think this will be a good change. You know, hopefully it'll alleviate a little bit of congestion. Parents are very territorial. They'll come, they want to be the first one there and get that front spot. And, you know, then we have a bus come up, and bus drivers are very regimental. They'll come up, and if their spot's not available, the rest of the buses will wait down on Oak Street or somewhere near until they get in the right order. So,
Is there a place for the parents to drop off their kids that they don't have to cross 8th Street?
yeah, they drop them off along the curb side of our school.
On the
Yeah,
north
west
side?
Yep. But then there's a fair amount too that drop them off across the road. And so they get a little creative there, and that always makes me leery. You know, they'll drop off on, like, say, Avon Street, and the kids will walk. But it's been working pretty good, actually, last year and this year, other than a little congestion down here on the
Okay.
south end.
So this is just for pickup and drop-off times, right?
Yep. Well, this would be all day. I think the way it's worded, we really wouldn't have anybody, visitors in the school wouldn't park here anyway. So I think the way this is worded, it would be all day.
Well, I'm just thinking somebody that needs to drop off their kid during,
We
You know,
funnel
taking them
everybody
to an
through
appointment.
door A, which would be across from the church lot. So they wouldn't, this would be inconvenient for them to park anyway. They'd have to walk along.
all the way
8th Street.
around, is
Yep.
what you're saying?
Yep.
Any other questions by committee?
I'm just looking at this, I'm just reading this, it looks like it says between 8 AM and 8:45 AM, and then 3 PM to 4 PM on school days. Just so you know.
Sure.
So that's what was included with the request from PD, and it is consistent, or more closely consistent, with the other signage.
On 8th Street.
On 8th Street.
Okay.
So it mimics,
Yep.
it mimics that. It's slightly different at times, but 5 minutes, I think. So,
Yeah, that, you know, sometimes you'll have people that park there then, and, you know, well, at the school, we'll have to have them go out and move their car. I know at Lincoln, we have the same thing in the bus lot there. But if that's consistent with what's on 8th Street, that'd be fine, yeah. And that is the way it's worded, correct. So any other questions? Good, thank you, guys.
Okay, what are the committee's wishes?
I'll make a motion to approve the proposed ordinance amendment to Chapter 27, parking as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll go to vote. All in favor, respond with aye. Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, we will move on to item number 9, review the Public Works Committee referral list. Mr. Terry.
So I don't have anything to add or take off at this time. And I haven't received anything else from anyone else, but just kind of a reminder, if you've got anything you want to see on the Public Works referral list, you can get that to me, and I can get it on the list, and I always review it monthly with Ryan to see, what we want to get onto the agenda. So having a referral like this, list like this works really well, because we can stay on top of it.
Mr. Bemke.
Quick question, traffic study on Chestnut Street, and are we ready to have that as a referral?
We're just, so the counts have been in, just getting to doing the report now, so it should be ready in another week here.
So when that work is done, can we get that as a referral on there for the stop sign on 12th and Chestnut? When that work is complete? Thank you.
Anyone have any other referrals? Okay, we'll move on to item 10. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
and I'll second. All in favor, respond with aye. Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.